I never thought it would come to this. I've spent 27 years raising my son Charlie, but today, on his wedding day, it feels like I'm nothing more than a stranger in his life. It started with a phone call 2 days ago, Charlie asking me not to come to the ceremony. He was blunt about it, no sugarcoating, no remorse. He said my presence would ruin everything, that I would embarrass him in front of his friends and future in-laws. I should have been used to his coldness by now, but hearing it again, especially on a day meant for him to start his own family, felt like a slap in the face. I was sitting on the porch of my shop, looking out at the ocean when he called. The air was crisp and the sun was low on the horizon, casting a golden glow over the city. I could hear the faint sound of the waves breaking on the shore, but all I could focus on was the sinking feeling in my chest. His voice, clipped and impatient, seemed so far removed from the child I'd once held in my arms. The boy who swore to protect me when he grew older, who promised me he'd never leave me. But that was before he learned the value of money. I'd been the one who stayed up late when he was sick, the one who worked long hours in my restoration shop, preserving artifacts for a life I was building for us. When Benjamin died, it was just Charlie and me. I did my best to make him feel safe, to provide him with everything he needed, and to make him believe that we were enough, that we could survive anything together. But somewhere along the way, he stopped seeing that. Instead, he saw a mother who was too content with her quiet life, who didn't share his obsession with wealth or status. Now Charlie was about to marry a woman who I could barely stomach. Emma was charming, sure, but I saw through it. She had an agenda, and it was clear to me that she didn't care much for me either. She wanted the money, the status that came with being part of a successful family. She saw me as nothing more than an old woman stuck in the past. The call ended without a goodbye, and I sat there for a while, staring at the ocean, letting the waves drown out the pain. But the truth was, it wasn't the pain of his words that hurt the most. It was the reality of the distance between us. I didn't belong in his world anymore, and I hadn't for a long time. Charlie couldn't understand why I lived the way I did. He didn't know about the Bitcoin Benjamin had invested in all those years ago, or the small fortune I kept hidden, not for me, but for the future Benjamin had dreamed of. I didn't want to burden Charlie with it, especially when he seemed to have no appreciation for the quiet sacrifices I had made for him. He wanted more, and that's exactly what I couldn't give him. I grabbed my coat and walked out of the shop, knowing exactly what I had to do. It wasn't about showing up to the wedding anymore, it was about letting him go, once and for all. The wedding wasn't for me, it was for him, and he had no place for me in his new life. I never had a grand vision for my life. When I was younger, I thought I might want to travel, explore the world, maybe even write a book or two. But life has a way of setting its own path, doesn't it? And as much as I had my own dreams, I quickly realized my reality was about giving, not asking for anything in return. Benjamin used to say we didn't need much to be happy. We had each other, a small cozy apartment, and enough love to last a lifetime. That was our world for the first few years, when we were just starting out. But when Charlie came into our lives, everything changed. I became someone else entirely, someone who would do anything to see my son smile, to make sure he had what he needed. It didn't matter that we didn't have much. It didn't matter that we had to scrape by some months. We were a family, and that was enough. I spent the next few years teaching Charlie the way of the world, the quiet way. We didn't chase after the flashiness of wealth or fame, but I always tried to give him the tools to create a life that was meaningful. My restoration shop was where I spent most of my days, hunched over old pages, gently working on manuscripts that had survived centuries. It was a meditative process, each restoration a little act of love. Slowly I came to love the work more than anything else, perhaps because I could pour myself into it and not have to face the confusion of the outside world. When Benjamin passed away, I thought I might collapse. I thought I'd lose everything. But I didn't. I held it together. I had to. Charlie was still young and I had to be strong for him. I never wanted him to see me break. But the years passed and I learned something new about myself every day. I was resilient. I could rebuild. I could make a new life, even without the man I'd once thought I couldn't live without. I didn't know it then, but Benjamin had left me something precious, something that would change everything. Years after his death, when I was going through some of Benjamin's old things, papers, books, and random scribbled notes, I found the key. It was small, old, tucked behind a drawer full of forgotten letters. And when I understood what it meant, when I understood what Benjamin had been quietly doing behind the scenes, I was shaken. The Bitcoin. At first, I didn't know what to make of it. Benjamin had always been ahead of his time. He saw potential in things other people overlooked. Bitcoin was a prime example of that. And though I wasn't sure what to do with it at the time, I held on to the key. I didn't cash out, didn't tell Charlie. I didn't need to. I wasn't ready for him to see me as a woman who had money, who had any wealth at all. But the quiet life I'd built with Benjamin, the one where we had everything we needed without the world knowing it, was about to change, whether I liked it or not. It's funny, isn't it, how we can live with someone for years and still have no idea about the secrets they keep. When Benjamin was alive, he was a quiet man, not a talker, not one to boast. But there was always something beneath the surface, something I couldn't put my finger on. He didn't have a lot of friends, didn't do the typical things that other men in his field did. He wasn't interested in fame or money, and yet somehow I knew he had a mind that saw things differently. It wasn't until after he was gone that I realized just how much he'd truly seen. I remember the day I found the Bitcoin key. It was late in the afternoon, the sun hanging low in the sky, casting long shadows across the floor of the attic. I'd been going through old things, papers from the tech conferences Benjamin used to attend, old receipts, bills. And there, tucked behind a faded envelope, I found it, a small metallic key with the inscription, "Wallet." At first I thought it was just a piece of junk, something he'd forgotten to throw away. But the odd thing about Benjamin was that he never threw anything away unless it meant something. So I held on to it, not sure why, and eventually shoved it into my drawer, not thinking much more of it. Months passed, and I had nearly forgotten about the key until one evening, while I was sorting through some more of his things, I decided to open it. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe I was just curious. Or maybe it was some deep, buried instinct that told me there was something I needed to understand. I'd been living in the same house for years, but I'd never really looked at it the way I did that night. I typed in the number etched into the back of the key, and suddenly everything changed. I was staring at a string of numbers on my screen, a long, seemingly random line of code, and then the amount, the balance. That's when I realized what I was looking at. Benjamin had been a pioneer. He had invested in Bitcoin back when it was worth next to nothing, back when no one knew what it was, including me. He saw it coming before anyone else did, and now that small investment, which he had probably forgotten about too, had grown into a small fortune. Millions. I sat back in my chair, trying to absorb it. I didn't know what to do with it. It felt like a weight pressing on my chest. How had I missed this? And why had Benjamin kept it a secret? It wasn't like him to hide things from me. He was always straightforward, sometimes too much so. But this was different. I didn't tell Charlie about it at first. He was just a kid when Benjamin passed away. And even though he was now an adult, I wasn't sure if I could trust him with this information. Our relationship had always been based on the little things, his toys, his homework, the small comforts of daily life. But something told me that this secret could change things between us in a way I wasn't ready for. So I did what I always did when something was too big to face. I kept it to myself. I put the key in a safe place, buried it in the back of my drawer, and continued on with my quiet life. But inside, something had shifted. I was no longer the woman who had to scrape by or make do. I had choices now. Choices I hadn't known I had before. But that was the problem. I didn't know what to do with all this power, and I certainly didn't want to make a mistake with it. It was the quiet moments, the ones I used to savor, that started to feel unbearable. The sound of the clock ticking in my shop, the scent of old pages. These used to be my refuge, my sanctuary, but lately it all felt empty. The peace I'd once cherished had become a reminder of how far apart Charlie and I had grown. It wasn't just that he was getting married. It wasn't the wedding itself, though it hurt more than I could admit. It was how we had drifted so far from each other that the thought of him in another person's arms felt like a cruel joke. I had raised him to be kind, to appreciate the small things, but somewhere along the way, he stopped seeing me for who I was. He saw me as a relic of the past, an obstacle to the life he thought he deserved. I tried to tell myself it was just a phase, that he would come around, but every conversation we had only made things worse. He was growing into a man who could barely look at me without a hint of disdain in his eyes. His words had always been sharp, but they were becoming cutting, aimed straight at my heart. "Mom, you never try to adapt. You're stuck in some old world mentality. I don't get you." His voice rang in my head, the words echoing long after they'd been spoken. It wasn't just a passing comment. It was the truth as he saw it, and that truth had crushed me. We were worlds apart. Charlie's life was all about instant gratification, climbing the corporate ladder, proving himself in a world that didn't care about history, about the quiet, enduring things. He was obsessed with technology, with moving fast, with modernity. But me, I was content with my hands in old books, with the stories of the past, with restoring what time had worn away. I didn't need the world to see me. I didn't need recognition. I needed peace, but Charlie didn't see that. He saw only stagnation. He saw me as a burden. It wasn't until I found the Bitcoin wallet that I realized how different we had become. The money was never meant to change us. Benjamin's investment wasn't about wealth. It was about foresight. It was about seeing what others couldn't. Benjamin had always been the visionary, and in some ways I had followed him into the quiet, simple life we shared. But Charlie didn't understand that. To him, the Bitcoin wasn't a legacy, it was a ticket to an easy life. It was a chance for me to be everything I wasn't: flashy, wealthy, modern. Charlie didn't know about the Bitcoin. He didn't know about Benjamin's quiet gamble or how I'd kept it hidden. He thought I was just a woman stuck in the past, a woman who had sacrificed everything for him and got nothing in return. And maybe he was right. I had spent so many years giving him my all, my time, my money, my strength, and now I had nothing left to give. And yet, the Bitcoin, hidden away like a secret treasure, felt like my last hope. But I wasn't ready to share it with Charlie, not yet. He wasn't ready. He hadn't earned it. I hadn't earned it either, I thought, not yet. That day, as I looked at Charlie from across the room at his wedding, I saw something in his eyes, something I hadn't seen in years. It wasn't just resentment anymore, it was something deeper. It was a recognition of the things he'd never understood about me. But it was too late for that. The moment I turned and walked away, I knew things would never be the same again. I didn't expect the wedding to go the way it did, but in hindsight, I probably should have. It was all building up to this quiet, sharp sting of betrayal that I'd felt for years but never truly faced. The ceremony was beautiful, or so I'm told. I didn't stay long enough to find out for myself. Charlie had insisted I stay away, and for a moment I thought about defying him. What could it hurt? It wasn't as if I was asking for anything more than a chance to see my son, marry the woman he had chosen. But when I saw him standing there at the altar, his hand in Emma's, I felt like an outsider in my own family. He was beaming with happiness, so sure of his future, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I no longer had a place in it. I tried to convince myself it was just a wedding, that I could walk away without making a scene, but as I stood there, watching them exchange vows, something inside me snapped. I didn't belong in that moment, in that world. They didn't need me, not really. The ceremony was over before I knew it. I hadn't even been able to congratulate Charlie or Emma. I had slipped out quietly, unnoticed in the sea of guests. As I made my way to the exit, the cool night air hit my face and I took a deep breath. I should have been happy for him, but instead I felt nothing but a deep, hollow ache. Later that night, as I sat alone in my small apartment, Charlie called. I'd been dreading it, but I answered anyway. "Mom, where are you?" His voice was urgent, desperate even. "You should have been here. You ruined everything." I could hear the anger in his voice, the frustration, and for a split second I almost apologized. I almost told him I was sorry for not being who he wanted me to be. But then I remembered something that had been eating away at me for years. The life I had given him, the sacrifices I'd made, the love I'd poured into him, all of it was gone. He couldn't see me, not really. "I didn't ruin anything, Charlie," I said, my voice steady, "but I think you're the one who doesn't understand." "Don't act like I'm the one who doesn't get it," he shot back. "You're so caught up in your old books and your quiet life, and now look, Emma and I are moving on with our lives. I can't have you dragging me down anymore. You're just stuck in the past." His words stung, each one hitting harder than the last. He didn't see the sacrifices I'd made, the way I'd put my dreams on hold to raise him, to give him a future. I wanted to tell him how much I had done for him, how I had spent my life working to build a future he would never truly understand. But I didn't. I just listened to him rant, feeling the weight of it all pressing down on me. "I'm not going to apologize for who I am," I said finally. "But I won't be part of your world anymore, Charlie. Not if you can't see me for who I am." He fell silent on the other end of the line, and for a moment I thought he might finally understand. But then the silence was broken, not with an apology or a promise to change, but with a sharp, cutting sentence. "You're just going to walk away? Fine, but don't expect to come back. You're dead to me." The words hit me like a physical blow. Dead to me. It wasn't the first time I'd heard something like that from him, but it was the first time I truly felt it. That was the moment I realized how far gone our relationship was. I hung up the phone and sat there in the dark, feeling the weight of his words settle around me. But I didn't cry. I couldn't. There was nothing left to cry for. He had made his choice and I had made mine. As I stared out the window, I knew I was done trying to make him understand, done holding on to a relationship that had been broken for too long. Charlie had his life now and I had mine, and whatever happened from here on out, I wouldn't be the one to make the first move anymore. The days after the wedding passed in a blur. I didn't hear from Charlie again, and honestly, part of me was relieved. The silence wasn't comforting exactly, but it was peaceful. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was walking on eggshells around him, trying to navigate his moods and expectations. I had my own life to live now, or at least that's what I told myself. I spent the next few weeks in a kind of daze, lost in the rhythm of my work, the same routine I had followed for decades. The hum of the restoration shop, the smell of old leather and paper, it all felt familiar and soothing. Each morning, I'd go to my small office, shut the door, and lose myself in the delicate process of mending something that had lived longer than I had. In some ways, it felt like the perfect metaphor for my life, quietly putting pieces together, trying to repair something that was falling apart. I had spent so long fixing things for others, books, paintings, even Charlie, that I had forgotten about myself. But now, with no one to care for except myself, I found an unexpected freedom in it. There was no one to answer to, no one to second-guess me. Just me and my work. I started to think about things differently, as if I had been given a second chance. Benjamin's investment in Bitcoin, the fortune he had left behind, felt more like a weight than a gift. But as I spent more time with it, I realized something. Maybe it wasn't about the money. Maybe it was about what I could do with it. It wasn't a life-changing amount of wealth, but it was enough to secure my future, to live the way I wanted. I didn't need to live in a mansion or splurge on extravagant things. But there were things I had always wanted to do, things Benjamin and I had talked about before his death. Travel, see the world, experience life outside of these four walls I'd built around myself. The first thing I did was hire someone to help around the shop. It wasn't much, just a part-time assistant who could take care of some of the small, tedious tasks that I had been doing myself for years. Her name was Lily, and she was young, eager to learn, and fascinated by the art of restoration. It felt good to share the work, to pass on some of what Benjamin and I had built together. She was a reminder that life still had a future, even when the past felt like it was slipping away. With Lily handling the smaller tasks, I started looking into travel options. I didn't make any rash decisions, but I began to research destinations I had dreamed of visiting but had never gotten the chance to. Italy, Greece, Spain. I wasn't ready to go just yet, but the thought of it, of seeing the world, living for myself, for once was invigorating. I had spent so many years taking care of Charlie, making sure he had everything he needed, that I had forgotten about my own dreams. But now it felt like it was my turn. It was my time to be selfish, to live the way I wanted. I had already sacrificed so much for my son, and what had I received in return? Nothing but coldness and resentment. I wasn't angry anymore. Not at Charlie, not at anyone. I was just done. Done trying to prove myself, done trying to fix relationships that had already broken beyond repair. I wasn't waiting around for permission or for someone to tell me it was okay to start living. I was going to take the time I had left and do something meaningful with it. Something that was just for me. It was late in the afternoon when the phone rang, its harsh sound pulling me out of the deep focus I'd been lost in all day. I was working on a delicate manuscript, carefully restoring the pages so they could be preserved for another 100 years, when I heard the ring echo through the quiet shop. I almost didn't pick it up, but I knew it was him. Charlie. I hadn't heard from him since the wedding, and to be honest, I hadn't expected to hear from him again. He'd made his feelings clear. At least I thought he had. I wasn't sure what he could say now that would change anything. Still, something inside me urged me to pick up. Maybe I was still holding on to some hope, some tiny flicker of the son I used to know, the one who loved me without reservation. I wiped my hands on a cloth and picked up the phone. Mom, his voice came through the line, hesitant at first. I need to talk to you. There was a long pause. I didn't say anything. I just let the silence hang there between us, not rushing to fill it. I wasn't sure what I was supposed to say. I wasn't angry anymore, just tired. Tired of pretending, tired of the expectations, tired of trying to be the perfect mother for someone who couldn't appreciate it. Why didn't you come? He asked, his voice softening. I thought you'd be there. I wanted you to be there. I could hear the guilt in his tone, and for a moment I almost felt sorry for him. It wasn't easy being caught between two worlds. Between a mother who had always been there for him and a wife who wanted nothing to do with the past. He had married Emma, and I knew, deep down, that I wasn't part of that world. Not anymore. I wasn't going to cause a scene, Charlie, I said, my voice steady. I made my choice, you made yours. He paused. as if unsure how to continue. I didn't mean what I said. You have to understand I was just caught up in everything. It was my wedding, and I thought it would be better if you weren't there. But now I regret it. I wish you could have been there. The words seemed genuine, but I wasn't convinced. He had said worse things, and I wasn't about to let him rewrite history. I had spent too many years apologizing for things I didn't need to apologize for. You don't have to regret it, Charlie, I said quietly. It was your day. You didn't need me there. I waited for him to respond, but there was only silence again. I could almost feel the distance between us growing with every passing second. It was as if the words we were saying weren't even real anymore. They were just echoes of what used to be. I'm sorry, Mom, he said, the apology sounding more like an afterthought now. I know I haven't been the best son, and I've probably hurt you more than I'll ever understand, but I don't want to lose you. I took a deep breath. You already have. It wasn't harsh, not really. It was just the truth. There was a finality in it, something that I had come to accept over time. Charlie had already made his choice when he turned his back on me, and I, in turn, had made mine. I wasn't angry at him anymore, but I couldn't keep pretending like everything was okay when it wasn't. You're my son, I said softly, but you've made your life, and I've made mine. We can't keep holding on to what's already gone. He choked on his words, but I didn't give him the chance to say anything else. I'm not angry, Charlie, I said, cutting him off. I'm just done, and I'm okay with that now. For a moment, there was nothing but the sound of his breath on the other end of the line. Then finally he spoke. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, I replied, my voice steady. I've said everything I needed to. And with that, I hung up the phone. I stood there for a long time, the phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the quiet that had settled around me. Charlie had finally spoken the words I needed to hear, even if they weren't enough to undo the damage. I wasn't sure if things could ever go back to how they were, but I didn't need them to. It was over, and in a strange way it felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. The days following my conversation with Charlie were quiet, almost unnervingly so. The silence in my shop seemed louder, the ticking of the old clock on the wall almost too sharp. But I wasn't bothered by it. I'd grown used to the quiet. There was something comforting in it, in the absence of noise and expectations. I hadn't thought much about the Bitcoin for a while after that night. It wasn't the kind of thing I liked to dwell on. The fortune Benjamin had left me, it felt both like a blessing and a burden. What was I supposed to do with it? What was the point of wealth when you had no one to share it with? But one night, as I was sitting in the dim light of my shop, carefully restoring an old painting, my mind wandered back to the wallet key. I had kept it hidden in a small drawer tucked under some old papers. No one had asked about it, and I was relieved. It wasn't something I ever intended to tell Charlie, not yet. He had no idea what I had, and part of me wanted to keep it that way. The thought of him knowing, of him expecting something from me, felt uncomfortable. Still, the temptation was there, in the back of my mind. The Bitcoin was worth millions now. I could sell it. I could move to a new place, start over. I could travel like I'd always dreamed, see the world. I'd never lived for myself, not really. There had always been someone else, Charlie, Benjamin, and now it could be my turn. I hadn't touched the wallet key for months, but tonight something was different. I felt a pull, a need to know exactly what was waiting for me. So I went to the drawer, retrieved the key, and sat at my desk. My hands were steady as I typed in the number, the code that Benjamin had written on the back of the key all those years ago. The screen flickered for a moment, then revealed the balance. Millions. I stared at the number, my mind racing. It was more money than I'd ever thought I would have, and yet It didn't feel like a windfall. It felt like a reminder of everything I had lost. Benjamin had seen something in this, had believed in it, and now it had paid off. But I wasn't sure how I felt about it. It was a lot to take in. What would Charlie think if he knew? Would he expect me to share it with him, to give him everything he'd ever wanted? Would he think I had kept it from him out of spite, or because I wanted to control him? The thought of him getting his hands on this money, of him believing that it was all his by right, made my stomach turn. But it wasn't just about the money, it was about what it represented. Benjamin had believed in this, had seen the potential for something greater, something outside the conventional world of wealth and status. He had made a choice, one that had ultimately changed everything for us. For me, the fortune wasn't just a bank balance. It was a testament to his vision, his ability to see the future. It was a piece of him, a part of the life we could have had, if only he had lived long enough to see it. I shut off the computer and put the key back in the drawer. I didn't want to make any decisions just yet. Not today, not tomorrow, but soon. I knew that if I was going to take control of my life, really take control, I would need to make a choice. And that choice wasn't just about what to do with the Bitcoin. It was about what kind of life I wanted from here on out. One thing was certain, though, I wasn't going to let anyone take that choice from me. Not Charlie, not anyone. I spent the next few days with a strange sense of clarity. My life, once quiet and routine, now felt like it was teetering on the edge of something new, something unknown. I wasn't sure if I was ready to take that leap, but I knew I couldn't keep living the way I had. Not anymore. I had spent so many years focused on everyone else, on Charlie, on keeping the shop running, on holding on to memories of Benjamin, that I had forgotten about myself. It was as if I had lived my life on autopilot, keeping my head down, doing the work, and getting by. But the world had changed around me, and now I was facing a crossroads. The Bitcoin, the fortune Benjamin had left, was a symbol of a future I hadn't planned for, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to embrace it yet. I often found myself standing at the windows of my shop, looking out at the streets of Santa Monica. The city had changed so much over the years. The world outside my little corner of it had shifted in ways I hadn't noticed until now. Young people hustling down the sidewalk, glued to their phones, the pulse of modern life moving faster than I could keep up with. It was strange, unsettling almost, to think that this was the world Charlie lived in now, a world where everything was about convenience, speed, and status. I wasn't a part of that world, and I wasn't sure I ever wanted to be. I had never been one to embrace technology, not in the way Charlie had. He had always been drawn to the digital world, to the idea of instant access and instant gratification. I used to wonder if I had failed him in some way by not being part of that world. But now, looking at the shiny, fast-moving world outside my shop, I realized I didn't want to be a part of it. I didn't need to. I had something else, something slower, more meaningful, a connection to the past that wasn't just about nostalgia. It was about preserving something real. When I restored a book or a piece of art, I didn't just fix the physical damage. I brought the story back to life, and that was something that no amount of technology could replicate. But as I thought about it more, I realized I didn't want to live my entire life in the past either. Benjamin had seen something in Bitcoin, something that I hadn't understood at the time. And now I had the chance to do something with it. Something that could give me a future, even if it meant stepping out of my comfort zone. The question was, what was I supposed to do with that future? I had spent so much time focused on keeping everything together, on making sure Charlie had what he needed, that I had forgotten about my own dreams. I had always wanted to travel, to see the world, to experience life outside of this little shop. but there had always been something else to do, always someone else to care for. I had put my life on hold for so long that I didn't even know where to start. But now I had the chance to choose for myself. I had the chance to live for me. I wasn't ready to take the leap just yet, but the thought of it, of having the freedom to live my life the way I wanted, filled me with a quiet kind of excitement. I didn't need to chase after the fast-paced digital world that Charlie had embraced. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. I just needed to be true to myself, to live on my own terms. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. It wasn't the kind of regret I expected. I thought when I made the decision to step away from Charlie, to stop trying to fix what had been broken between us, I would feel a sense of finality, a sense of peace. But instead, I found myself drifting in a sea of thoughts I couldn't quiet. The past, the future, the decisions I had made, they all tangled together in my mind like an old fraying thread. I had decided that I wasn't going to chase after him anymore, that was clear. I couldn't keep begging for a relationship with someone who had no interest in understanding me. But as the days passed, a small voice inside me began to question whether I had done the right thing. Had I really made peace with it, or was I just hiding from the truth? I hadn't heard from Charlie since the phone call. Part of me, most of me, was relieved by the silence. But there was still that tiny flicker of doubt. What if this was the last time I'd ever speak to him? What if I had given up too soon? I tried to keep myself busy, throwing myself into work, but it wasn't enough to silence the nagging feeling that lingered in the pit of my stomach. The thought of him, of his life moving on without me, without any acknowledgement of all I had done, was hard to ignore. The more I tried to push it out of my mind, the more it seemed to take hold. The phone sat on the corner of my desk, a constant reminder that it was still there. It had been nearly a week since the wedding, but I couldn't bring myself to pick it up. Part of me wanted to call him, to explain again that I wasn't angry, that I just couldn't keep fighting for something he wasn't willing to fight for. But another part of me knew that nothing would change. No matter how many times I tried to explain myself, it would never be enough for him to truly understand. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that maybe I was the one who needed to change. Not for Charlie, but for me. For the first time in a long while, I was truly living for myself. The choices I made now had nothing to do with anyone else's expectations. The Bitcoin, the money Benjamin had left, it wasn't about making up for anything. It wasn't about proving my worth to anyone. It was about reclaiming my life. Still, there was a lingering sadness in my heart, a small, persistent ache that I couldn't shake. I had tried so hard for so many years to be the mother Charlie wanted, to be the person he needed. But somewhere along the way I had lost myself. And now, as I stared at the phone on my desk, I realized that even though I was starting to find myself again, there would always be a part of me that wondered what could have been. What might have happened if I had held on a little longer, if I had tried harder. But that was the problem. I had tried too hard for too long. The truth was, I couldn't keep waiting for Charlie to change. I couldn't keep hoping for him to see me, to understand the sacrifices I had made. I had to let him go. And so I did. I picked up the phone and turned it off, sliding it back into the drawer. I wasn't ready to face the regret just yet. But maybe one day Charlie would understand. Maybe he would see how much I had loved him, how much I had sacrificed for him. But for now, that wasn't my burden to carry. I had already let him go. Now I had to let myself go too. It's funny how quickly things change. One moment everything seems perfectly still, and then in the blink of an eye, everything shifts. I'd thought I was finally in control of my life again. free from the weight of guilt and obligation that had tied me to Charlie for so long. But it wasn't to last. Charlie called again. I saw his name flash on the screen, and for a brief moment I hesitated. My hand hovered over the phone, and I almost didn't pick up. I'd made my peace with the silence, with the distance that had grown between us. But I couldn't ignore it this time. It was him, and I knew he wasn't calling just to check on me. "Mom?" Charlie's voice crackled through the line. He sounded anxious, a little frantic even. I need your help." I frowned. It wasn't the first time he'd asked for help, but it was the first time he sounded like this. The urgency in his voice gave me pause. I sat down at my desk, bracing myself for whatever he was about to say. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral, though I could already feel the familiar tightness in my chest. It's my business," he said, his words tumbling out faster now. "The startup I've been working on. Things aren't going well, and I need cash, fast. I know you've got the Bitcoin, and I need it." I wasn't sure I'd heard him correctly. I didn't want to believe it. Was he really asking for money? Again? I sat back in my chair, my hand tightening around the edge of the phone. "You want me to give you the Bitcoin?" I repeated, disbelief flooding my chest. "You think just because I have it, it's yours for the taking?" No, it's not like that," he quickly backtracked. "I'm just asking for a little help. I know I haven't been the best son, and I get it. I do. But this is different. This is business. I'm trying to build something, and I need you to believe in me. Just this once." I shook my head, a bitter laugh escaping my lips before I could stop it. "Believe in you?" The words felt foreign in my mouth, but the truth was they had been on the tip of my tongue for years. I had believed in him. I had believed in everything he could be. I sacrificed so much for him, did everything I could to make sure he had the opportunities I never had. But somewhere along the way, I stopped being his mother. I started being a resource, a bank he could draw from whenever he was in need. And I was tired of it. "Charlie, you don't get it," I said, my voice steady, even though my heart was hammering in my chest. "The Bitcoin isn't just some fund you can dip into whenever things aren't going your way. It wasn't meant to be your safety net." He was quiet for a moment, and I could almost hear the wheels turning in his head. He wasn't used to being told no. He was used to me being there, ready to step in and fix everything when it went wrong. I had always been the one to pick up the pieces when his life fell apart. But not anymore. "Mom, please," he said, his voice softer now. "I don't know who else to turn to. You're all I've got left. Please." I paused, my fingers lightly tapping on the desk. He was using the words that always worked on me, the ones that made me feel guilty, the ones that tugged at my heart. But this time, they didn't have the same effect. "Charlie," I said, my voice finally breaking through the silence. "I've given you everything. I've done everything for you. But this is mine. I've worked for it, and it's not yours to take." There was a long pause, and for a moment I thought he might finally understand. But then he spoke, and I could hear the frustration in his voice. "You're being unreasonable," he said, his tone growing sharper. "It's just money, Mom. It's not like you need it. You're sitting on a fortune and doing nothing with it. Why can't you just help me out?" I felt the last of my patience slipping away, the weight of the years, of the sacrifices, of the unspoken resentment. It all came crashing down. "It's not about the money, Charlie. It's about the fact that you don't see me. You never have. You've only ever seen what I can give you. But I'm not your bank. I'm not your safety net. I'm your mother, and that means something different now." There was no response on the other end of the line, no apology, no acknowledgement of what I had said, just silence. "I'm sorry, Mom," he finally muttered, and the words felt hollow. I'll figure it out, I won't ask again. I hung up the phone before he could say anything else. I sat there for a long time staring at the phone, the weight of his demand still heavy in my chest, but this time there was no regret, no second guessing. I had made my decision, and for the first time in years, I felt sure of it. The quiet that followed Charlie's call settled in like a weight, but not one that crushed me. Instead, it was as if I had been carrying it for so long that I had forgotten it was even there. The truth was, I had sacrificed enough. I had spent my life thinking that love meant giving up parts of myself for the sake of others, but now I realized that I had given away more than I could afford. I spent the next few days thinking about the call. Charlie's voice full of expectation, of entitlement, and the strange emptiness that followed. I hadn't expected him to understand, but I hadn't expected him to demand so much from me either. And I realized in that moment that it wasn't just about the Bitcoin. It never had been. It was about everything I had given and everything I had left to give. It wasn't the first time Charlie had asked for help, and I knew it wouldn't be the last, but this time something had shifted in me. I wasn't going to be his fallback anymore. I wasn't going to be the one to pick up the pieces when he couldn't make things work. I had spent too many years walking on eggshells around him, making sure he had what he needed, making sure he wasn't disappointed in me. I had lived my life for him, for Benjamin, for everyone except myself. But that had to end. The next morning, I went to the drawer where I kept the Bitcoin key. It had been sitting there, untouched, waiting for a decision I was too afraid to make. I picked it up, holding it in my hand like I was holding a piece of my future. It wasn't just about the money, I told myself. It was about control, about making the decision to take back what was mine. I couldn't change what had happened with Charlie. I couldn't undo the years of sacrifice or the growing distance between us, but I could change how I move forward. And it started with this. I didn't immediately cash out the Bitcoin. I wasn't ready to part with it just yet, but I made the decision to use it. Not for Charlie, not for anyone else, but for me. It was time to start living for myself. I began to plan my first trip. Something small, just a weekend getaway to a quiet place outside the city. The idea of being alone, truly alone, in a place where no one could expect anything from me was exhilarating. For the first time in years, I felt like I was standing on the edge of something I had wanted for so long, something I had buried deep inside me. Freedom. I wasn't sure what the future held, but that was the point, wasn't it? I had spent too many years following the path that was laid out for me. Now I was choosing my own. The next few days were filled with a strange sense of anticipation. I wasn't sure what I was waiting for, but I knew I was on the verge of something significant. Maybe it was just the fact that I had finally taken control of my life, or maybe it was the idea that for the first time I was living for me. And that felt good, really good. It didn't take much to start. Just a weekend trip, a simple getaway. But that simple plan felt like a revolution. I had booked a small cabin by the lake, far away from the noise, far from the life I had built around everyone else. It wasn't luxurious, but it was perfect. Just me, the sound of the water, the wind through the trees, and nothing else. I packed lightly as if to reinforce the idea that I wasn't carrying any baggage anymore, physical or emotional. I had done my best to carry the weight of everyone else for so long, but now I was shedding it. I didn't need much. A few clothes, a journal, a camera, and the peace I had been craving for so long. The drive was quiet, and as the city faded behind me, I could feel the tension in my shoulders begin to ease. For the first time in ages, I wasn't checking my phone every 5 minutes, wasn't listening for a message or a call. There was no one depending on me, no one expecting anything, and it felt like a release. When I arrived at the cabin, I stood there for a moment, taking in the sight of the lake, the mountains in the distance. It was breathtaking, and for a moment I just stood there, breathing in the air like it was the first time I had ever truly taken a breath. The next few days were a blur of simplicity. I woke up with the sun, made coffee on the small porch, and watched the light change across the water. I spent hours walking through the woods, taking photographs of the landscape. There were no deadlines, no urgent phone calls, no expectations. There was only the here and now. I had time to think, time to reflect. For the first time in years, I wasn't running. I wasn't trying to keep up. I wasn't fixing things or trying to solve problems that didn't belong to me. I began to understand something important. The life I had been living wasn't the only one available to me. I had been so focused on others, on Charlie, on keeping everything together, that I had lost sight of who I was. But now, in this place, I was finding pieces of myself I had long forgotten. The next morning, I sat on the porch, my feet propped up on the railing, and I opened my journal. I hadn't written in it in years, but today felt different. Today felt like the beginning of something new. For the first time in a long time, I wrote, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I wrote about the freedom I was feeling, about the weight that had lifted from my shoulders. I wrote about the woman I was becoming, the woman I was finally letting myself be. The trip wasn't just a break from my life, it was a rebirth. It was a chance to rebuild my life, my identity, and my sense of self-worth. I wasn't just the woman who had lived for everyone else. I was Fran Langley, and I was going to live for me. And as I closed my journal that night, the last light of the day fading into dusk, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: peace. I returned home from my trip feeling like a different person. The cabin by the lake had been a sanctuary, a temporary escape that had given me space to breathe, to think. But as I pulled into the driveway of the house I had shared with Charlie for years, I knew it was time for the final step. Charlie hadn't reached out in the weeks since the phone call. There had been no apology, no real attempt to bridge the gap between us, and for once, I wasn't waiting for him to make the first move. I was done with that. I had spent my life hoping that if I just held on long enough, he would come around, but the truth was, I couldn't keep waiting for him. I couldn't keep living my life based on his decisions, his moods, his demands. I took a deep breath as I unlocked the door and stepped into the house. It felt familiar, too familiar, the worn furniture, the pictures on the walls, the silence that seemed to fill every room. This house had been a home once, but now it felt like a prison. The years of sacrifice, the years of being the caretaker, the mediator. It all hit me in that moment. I had been living for everyone else, and it was time to stop. I went to my room and began packing. I wasn't leaving forever, though part of me wondered if I was. But for now, I needed to leave this house behind. I needed to create some space between me and everything that had weighed me down. As I packed my bags, I realized something. The physical act of leaving was almost easy. It was the emotional part that was hard, the part where I finally had to let go of the idea that things could ever go back to the way they were. When I was done, I took one last look around the house. I had spent years here, raising Charlie, making a life with Benjamin, but those days were over. This house wasn't mine anymore. I stepped outside, suitcase in hand, and closed the door behind me. There was no fanfare, no dramatic exit, just me, walking away from the life I had known, the life I had been holding on to for so long. I wasn't angry anymore. I had been angry, at Charlie, at Benjamin, at myself. But anger was exhausting, and I was tired of carrying it. I had learned that letting go wasn't just about walking away, it was about forgiving myself for the things I had done for others at the expense of my own happiness. As I drove away, leaving the house and Charlie behind, I felt lighter than I had in years. I wasn't sure where I was going or what the future held, but for the first time, I didn't feel lost. I felt free. The apartment I moved into wasn't anything special. 2 bedrooms, hardwood floors, a tiny balcony that looked out over the tops of other buildings. But when I opened the windows and let the breeze in, it felt like freedom. It was mine, all of it. Not Charlie's, not Benjamin's, not anyone else's. Just mine. I'd furnished it slowly, secondhand chairs, a reading lamp from a thrift store, plants I didn't know the names of but liked anyway. I set up a corner for my restoration work, though I was only taking on small jobs now. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. For the first time, I was choosing every part of my life with intention. I even bought a plane ticket. Spain. The idea came to me one morning as I sipped my coffee by the window. I remembered a book Benjamin once brought home to restore, an old travel diary written by a woman who had walked the Camino de Santiago. I remembered how moved I was by her entries, her quiet determination to do something just for herself. That stayed with me, so I booked the flight. No hesitation, no asking for permission. I was going. Before I left, I sat down and did something I hadn't done in years. I wrote a letter, not to Charlie, to Benjamin. Then, you saw something I didn't, in technology, in Bitcoin, in me. I've held on to your gift for so long, afraid to use it, afraid it would change who I am. But you knew, didn't you, that I'd need it, that someday I'd finally choose myself. Charlie never understood. Maybe one day he will, maybe not. But I've let go. I'm not angry anymore. I've just learned to stop expecting from people who don't see me. You did. You always did. I miss you, but I'm okay now, really okay. Fran? I folded the letter and placed it inside the first book Benjamin ever restored, a small poetry collection, tattered and yellowed but still holding together. I shelved it, not to forget him, but to keep that piece of us in its place, safe, respected. Spain was beautiful. I walked through sun-warmed streets, ate food I couldn't pronounce, got lost more than once, and didn't mind at all. I met people, other women traveling alone, not running from anything, just running towards something. One night, someone asked me if I had family. I paused before answering. I had a son, I said. Still do, I guess, but we don't speak much anymore. The woman nodded. Sometimes that's for the best. I didn't feel the need to explain. For once, I didn't feel guilty. I just smiled. On the flight home, I looked out the window and thought, this is what it means to live. Not survive, not serve, but live. And that's what I was going to keep doing?